You turn to Matthew chapter 8. I'll read here a bit. In verse 1 of Matthew 8. When he, that's Jesus, was come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, there came a leper and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be thou clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus saith unto him, See thou tell no man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded, for a testimony unto them. And when Jesus was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion beseeching him, and saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home, sick of palsy, grievously tormented. And Jesus saith unto him, I will come and heal him. And the centurion answered and said, Lord, I'm not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. For I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this man, Go, and he goeth. And to another, Come, and he cometh. And to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard it, he marveled, and said to them that followed, Verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And I say unto you that many shall come from the east and the west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And Jesus said unto the centurion, Go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so be it done unto thee. And his servant was healed in the selfsame hour. And when Jesus was come unto Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother laid and sick of a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her. And she arose and ministered unto them. When even was come, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits out with his word, and healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Isaiah the prophet, saying, Himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. I wanted to get down to that verse. I'll quote it later on, verse 18, but I want to come back and just focus in on the leper first. And I thought some of the kids may not know what leprosy is, so I found a description of leprosy, one of the few cases in our part of the world, and one of the more recent cases. There are not many of them in South America, North America, and this is the way it was described. It's quite an old description, but it says it works like this. The commencement of leprosy is imperceptible. It means you can't see it. There appear only some few white spots on the skin. At first they are attended with no pain or inconvenience, but no means whatever will remove them. So you got a white spot, you can't wash it off, you can't clean it off, you can't scrub it off. The disease imperceptibly increases for many years. The spots become larger and spread over the whole body. When the disease advances, the upper part of the nose swells, the nostrils become enlarged, and the nose itself grows soft. Tumors appear on the jaws, the eyebrows swell, the ears become thick, the points of the fingers, as also the feet and the toes, swell, the nails become scaly, the joints of the hands and feet separate and drop off. In the last stage of the disease, the patient becomes a hideous spectacle and falls to pieces. So that's just a little sense of the problem that this fellow was coming with. Because it says this in Luke. We're not going to turn there. In Luke 5, it says this is a man that was, quote, full of leprosy. So he's at the stage where he's hideous to behold. And so just to give you some background on that, the leper comes to Jesus and says, worshipped him and says, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. A lot of skeptics will say, well, he's stating lack of faith here. I don't see it that way, or lack of if he says, Lord, if you will, it's kind of like, well, I don't know if you can do this, but if you want, some would put a doubt upon this, but I don't. I think what he's acknowledging, number one, he's worshiping Christ. He says he came in Mark. It says he came and he fell on his knees, and in Luke it says he fell on his face. So he's coming before this Lord Christ, fully acknowledging the godhood of Christ. Say, Lord, Lord, if thou wilt. So he comes and he worships, it says here. He identifies Christ as the sovereign dispenser of healing. If you will, you can. If this is what you want, you can do this. And I note this also, after thinking about his situation. You might notice in verse 1, it says, when he came down from the mountain, great multitudes are following him. So he's in a whole bunch of people here. And I am certain that nobody wanted him around. Nobody wanted this fellow in their midst. After reading that he's full of leprosy and seeing what full of leprosy meant, I'm sure that no one wanted to be near him. No one wanted to touch him. They don't want him near them or near anyone around them. And yet he would not be deterred. He would not be deterred. He was going to find his way to Jesus, no matter what it took. And I began to think about that. How many things deter people from seeking after Christ? And I heard a quote the other day, and it really hit me. It didn't really have anything to do with the gospel, but it has everything to do with the gospel for some people. And they said, reputation is an idol. And I got to thinking about that. It just, how much what other people think about us or what we think about ourselves deter us. And these are idols. They inhibit us from seeking the Lord Christ. Things we think about ourselves or what we think other people think about us or fear of what other people think about us. This man wasn't going to be deterred by any of that. Yes, he's hideous. Yes, he's disgusting. Yes, no one around him would want to be near him, but he was not going to be deterred. He had to find his way to the feet of the Lord Christ and to fall on his face and say, Lord, if you will. And I thought, well, that's a great lesson for everybody that can be deterred and say, well, I've got this, and Lord, I've got that, and I've got these other issues, and I just can't seem to find my way there. Just facing that fact head on and saying, am I going to make an idol out of my reputation? Am I going to make an idol out of my fear of others and what others think? And I would encourage you, like this leper, to say, no, none of that matters. I've got to get there. So, and the other side of this is Jesus' response to him. First, it's certainly noteworthy that Jesus put forth his hand and touched him. He touched him. Nobody wanted to touch this fellow at all. And yet he drew, with great kindness, he drew near, he touched this man. Instead of being polluted by touching him, he cleansed the leper with his touch. And I was thinking about that. In the Old Testament, it talks about the scripture being like a fuller's, or Christ being like a fuller's soap. It cleanses the filth without getting filthy itself. So he touches the filth of this man without getting filthy himself. Still innocent, still guiltless, still perfect, and yet he heals this leper and sends him away joyful by reason of his cure. So the lesson I draw from that is, by nature, if we broaden this out a little bit, all men are plagued with the leprosy of sin. And where else is there to seek help other than the Savior? Of course, there is nowhere else. And the other thing is that, whatever your affliction is, and however deep you think your malady goes, you can always say, along with this fella, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And not only did Christ stretch out his arm to this fella, his hand, he more broadly, not only did he touch the decaying flesh of man, he became flesh and took upon himself our nature, or our humanity, if you will, that he might pay the debt of sin for each and every one that he came for. And you might notice also, if you look at the whole context of this, in Jesus touching him, he could have just said the word only. He didn't have to touch him, but he made a point to touch him. He made a point to touch him, showing his compassion, his love, his care. And that this man's sinful condition didn't turn him off. It wasn't something he couldn't handle. And so we think, I've known people over the years to be so guilt-ridden they think God can't deal with their problem or God can't touch them. But those are the exact people that need to fall before the Lord and say, if you will, you can make me clean. Because he is more than able to meet the need of the most notorious sinner, beyond that which we could even imagine. So the other thing about the leper is, and the lesson for us is that, he doesn't demand that Christ do anything. He doesn't say, well, I've done this, so now you need to do that. He doesn't come and ask for this cleansing on the basis of anything that he's done or will do. And he requested of God's mercy. And so there's a lesson for us in this as well, that so many in religion today think that whether it's, the whole bizarre cult of healing that surrounds us, and if you do this, then God will heal you, or whether it's even in salvation, if you do this, if you get baptized, or if you do this, or you do that, then God will heal you. And all that's nonsense. We don't come before the Lord and demand a debt be paid based on what we've done. We come before the Lord like this leper. Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. I don't have anything that would require you to do this or make you do this. It's only of your mercy and grace that this healing can occur. The second part is Jesus' response, where he says, I will, and be thou clean. What a blessed relief this must have been to this leper to hear those words, I will. I will, be thou clean. And wow, just by the mere expression of his will, he restores health to this man and to every sinner, because he has supreme authority. And that's something else that was acknowledged by this leper when he says, if you will, it'll happen. And that's acknowledgement of Christ's sovereignty, his godhood. And when he says, I will, we see it again, the power of God in Christ. It's a great encouragement for poor sinners to run to Christ under this sense of guilt and need, and he receives those sinners. He doesn't cast them out, but shows his kindness and mercy. Then he tells the leper, he says, see thou tell no man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. Now, some people see that as kind of odd, in the sense that, well, he just healed him. Why is he telling him to keep it quiet? And just digging into this a little bit deeper, he's not asking him not to conceal it or to keep it a secret. What he's saying is you need to go straight to the priests and tell them what has happened so that he could be pronounced clean. We'll go to Leviticus 14 here in just a minute. But anything that would delay him from doing that, or keep him, deter him from getting there quickly, might lead the priest to come to the wrong conclusion about what's happened. And so he doesn't want there to be any issues. He doesn't want to, maybe the priest, knowing that it came from Jesus, will be looking for excuses of different sorts to not pronounce him clean, and or for different reasons why he's clean. And Jesus says, go to them, offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. This is a message to them. This is a message to them. Also, it's obedience to the law. And Jesus came and fulfilled the law on the behalf of sinners. And part of fulfilling the law would be to not to instruct him to do something other than what the law commanded, but to do what the law commanded, which is what his instruction was to him. Turn to Leviticus 14. And this is what Jesus is referring to. Leviticus 14 says in verse 1, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing." Okay, that's what Jesus is referring to. "He shall be brought unto the priest." That's what Jesus sent him there. "And the priest shall go forth out of the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of the leprosy be healed in the leper, then shall the priest command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 birds alive and clean, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water." Now that's a picture of Christ becoming flesh and dying on the behalf of sinners. No question about that. "And as for the living bird, he shall take it, and the cedar wood, and the scarlet, and the hyssop, shall dip them and living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle upon him from that blood that is to be cleansed from the leprosy 7 times. In other words, he's going to take that blood and sprinkle him 7 times with that blood, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose into the open field." And that's what Pastor Chuck likes to say, free as a bird. Free as a bird on the basis of a death of another. And so this testimony to the priests is a powerful testimony in the cleansing of this leper. It goes on to say, "And that he that is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, and shave off all his hair, and wash himself in the water, that he may be clean. And after that he shall come into the camp, and shall tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. But it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave off all his hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows, even all his hair he shall shave off. And he shall wash his clothes, also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take 2 lambs without blemish, and 1 ewe lamb of the first year without blemish, and 3/10 deals of fine flour for a meat offering, mingled with oil, and 1 log of oil. And the priest that makes him clean shall," which would be Christ, "the priest that makes him clean shall present the man that is to be made clean, and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall take 1 he lamb, and offer him for a trespass offering, and a log of oil, and wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. And he shall slay the lamb in the place where he shall kill the sin offering and the burnt offering in the holy place. For as the sin offering is the priest's, so is the trespass offering its most holy. And the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil, and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. And the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, and shall sprinkle of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And of the rest of the oil that's in his hand shall the priest put upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot, and upon the blood of the trespass offering." Where he's going with this is this is the walk of the believer afterwards. The Spirit of God upon the believer, that the believer in the work of salvation, which is pictured in the healing of the leprosy. After that, the believer is going to continue to walk in the grace and knowledge of the Lord. And this oil that's the Spirit of God, and the finger, everything I do, everything I see and hear is going to be a different thing. It's going to be a different thing, and it's the walk of the believer comes after the salvation of the soul comes the walk of the believer, and so they're celebrating that as well in the second 3 different offerings after he's cleansed, and you can read that at your leisure. And they also kind of adjust it for depending on whether the person's poor that can afford these offerings or he can't. So it may be something for you to read later on. But the point here is that. He's to go to show himself to the priest for a testimony unto them that this is indeed the Lord's Christ that has come. and that he is meeting all the Father's demands of the ceremonial law, and he's in no way is he anything other than obedient. The last part would be in Mark chapter 1 and verse 45. If you turn there. In Mark 1 and verse 45, this leper, he went out, he couldn't contain himself. He began to publish it much, to blaze abroad the matter, insomuch that Jesus could no more openly enter into the city, but was without in desert places, and they came to him from every quarter. Now the Lord knew this was going to happen. It's for our instruction and admonition, but it certainly shows that those first saved, they're not made perfect. And it's this wasn't something that the whole Jesus's whole plan is messed up now. No, it's not. But there is something about a lesson that those who are saved by grace are not made perfect, and they still in the passions of life they sometimes forget to focus on what the Lord said and instead do their thing, and that's about all the more you can say about it. There's it changed Jesus' ministry logistically, but that was intended, and all glory to Christ. Nothing, nothing was amiss in God's plan. It's just a lesson about young believers and passions and emotions that sometimes run high. So in conclusion on all this, it comes back to verse 18 that I read originally, where it said, this fulfilled all these healings. I didn't go through all the ones there in Matthew 8, but the centurion that said, you don't need to come to my house, just say the word, and the other ones. This is all fulfillment of the scripture says that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses. Christ is bore the sickness of his people, the sin sickness, the fall of Adam imputed to every man, and bear it on our behalf. It's kind of interesting that he could bear that sickness without becoming that sickness, still innocent, still the innocent lamb, bearing that sickness all the way down to hell itself, and yet raised again because he was innocent before God. I always think of that example in Daniel when they threw him in the lion's den. Lions were starving when they threw him down there, and he was down there however long that was, and the king came to him and said, Daniel, is your God able to save you? And he says, yes, Lord, because there's innocence he found in me. I'm guiltless. And so it is with Christ, raised again in all, guiltless before the Father, and yet bearing our sickness on himself. All that we are, the sin and our failure, he bare on our behalf. And all of his righteousness, which is shown in the example of the two birds, is applied to us so that we are in fact free as a bird. So I encourage you to cast your idols, anything that would deter you, like this leper, that would deter you from coming to this Christ and saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. Cast it aside. Whatever would deter you, recognize that that is an idol. That's an idol. Come to him, recognize that you're in the exact same boat as this leper. You may not have your fingers sticking together yet. Your nose may not be all corrupted, but in terms of the sin nature, you're in the exact same place. And so I encourage you, toss those fears aside. Take your need to Christ. He and he alone, like the leper knew, he and he alone can save. It's his it's his prerogative, but it's also his glory to save his people from their sin. At the end of the day, he's pitiful, full of grace and mercy, and waits upon the call of a sinner for hope and help. Pastor Chuck, would you close us in a word of prayer?